Good day. I welcome you on my channel Divine Destiny of Souls, and this is episode 14, where I continue to tell the story of my shamanic awakening and how I met my soulmates in Vancouver. So I will continue the story, how I met Emilia and our healing journey over these coming episodes. So once we had this first meeting with Emma, and I had these realizations that I have seen this woman in my teenage dreams. I was trying to puzzle through all of that, but at the same time, over the next week, as Emilia was always in my space, I was just opening up to the feelings that I have to this woman, because it was a completely different and something that I never expected before. When everything that I experienced with Jessica and Christina was rooted in deep dramas and karma of past lives, and that's why my feelings for them were mostly confusing. Here, I didn't need to puzzle through this love, I just needed to accept it. It was just that feeling of yellow light. How I could describe that love, it was just descended upon me, and day after day, my ego was breaking apart, but I was opening up to this love. And a week later, our meeting exactly, it was my 40th birthday, and we went with Polly to have a swim in the lake, and Emilia was with us, and I just couldn't stop thinking that I'm falling in love with this woman, and there's nothing I could do, and that I loved her since the day I was 16 years old, when I first saw her in my teenage dream. But of course, the strangest part, that we still didn't know what to do. We still didn't know our full story with Polly, and so I kind of tried to push this love away to kind of not upset Polly, of course, and that we wanted to be together. But Polly was like, no, yeah, I see, you can't sort of you can't sort of trick me, right? Because she was inside of me, she could almost she was the one who saw that love emerging in my heart before I even accepted it. And she was like, don't lie to yourself, I know what you're experiencing, I can feel that through you. I understand that you don't want to hurt me, but at the same time, nobody knew that I would fall in love, start to fall in love in this way. And I was still reserved and kind of question everything, but that was I think the most joyous week over the long period of time, because I was like, oh my God, I feel life, resurfacing. I feel life. Living through me, and all these things kind of just warm feelings of falling in love. But I kind of still didn't know how Emma would react, or whether she would accept me as a client. We agreed, when we said our goodbyes, we agreed that I kind of told her that if you're gonna return to Vancouver, just email me with your dates. But if you don't want to see me again, just don't email me, and I'm going to be fine with that. So at that time, I still didn't know if she would accept me as a client. So I'm kind of was living in these small reservations, but at the same time, the most important part was to sort of concentrate on Emilia's healing, because if she arrived in my space, that was my obligation. And then on top of that, Emilia had a soul that can be described as Magdalene of love, and that's why Mary Magdalene, the goddess Mary Magdalene, asked me to meet this woman, because she perceived her as her spiritual daughter and ambassador on these lands, and she wanted to have her in the most empowering way. And so, because Mary helped me so much on this journey and assisted me with books and everything and channelings and gave me so much knowledge, she kind of like asked me to heal Emilia as a personal favor as well, beyond the fact that I was sort of like start to have experiencing feelings, and I was also like seeing how distressed Emilia was and how troubled she was. And then over this like next week, I also observed our first life together again, and kind of like just realized that this is where we met first, and just trying to understand if there's sort of like any trauma in that life. On the second day, I asked Emilia how she would like to be called, and she said, that was her exact words, because I'm of her royal status, I have a double name, so please call me Emilia Aurelia. And that was, of course, the reason for that name was because Polly, by that time, she accepted her angelical name. Like Polly was the name that we just used, and because she had trauma of Polly Jefferson, so that's why it was important for me to call her Polly as sort of like a form of healing as well. But her real angelical name was Eurydice, and that was the name that she had when we lived our third life in Greece, and that was her most empowering life as a woman. She understood what it means to be a woman, including that a karmic obligation of a woman is to help her man to discover his talents and to shine with them. And that was that life where she kind of like fully grasped that concept of femininity, and she also had 2 children in that life, so she also experienced the joy of motherhood in the most empowering way. So that's why she kind of like adopted that name as her main name, and that's why we named our book Eurydice in Love, to kind of like to reflect that. But she also believed that Eloise was one of her empowering lives, and so basically she used her name. She decided to go by the name Eurydice Eloise Wales, and Wales is of course the family name of Martha Jefferson, original name, when she was only born in the Wales family. And this was kind of like the last name that Polly wanted to use to kind of like honor Martha Jefferson and her commitments. And so, of course, Emilia seeing us with Eurydice and kind of like feeling sort of jealous, she specifically asked to use 2 names to heal her. But of course, by that time, I already knew that when souls come to me, they either use the name of their most empowering life or the most traumatizing life. And it was clear for me that both Emilia and Aurelia are her 2 names from different past lives, and these were the main lives that she needed to heal. And she specifically said that like she needs to heal Aurelia even more than Emilia. And so I kind of like I accepted that, and I started to sort of think what we can do, and I asked what she would like to heal, and she said that the main thing that she would like to heal is her existential sadness. This is how she worded it. And once we started to sort of unravel where that existential sadness came from, it mainly came from our first life together, because in that life we lived in happy marriage more than 20 years, and then I eventually died, and she was left alone. And so even though she was okay with burying me, she kind of like could process the grief, the only thing that she couldn't like sort of surrender to is not feeling the presence of my love and not being able to love me in return. Like that kind of like hurt her even more than the death or the grief itself. And so this where her existential sadness was created. And then she had 9 lives without me, and in the second life she received her hex from a wicked witch, and that hex kind of like locked in that existential sadness. And so that became sort of like a thing throughout her other lives, where she would experience losing her beloved, or like not really surrendering to love, and then losing her beloved, and that kind of like create this entire trauma for her, and the veils. She was like covered in these dark veils, and like she just felt like confused and broken, and she was like all over the place sometimes, and just didn't fully trusted me or Eurydice. And she kind of like, oh my god, you guys want to be together, you know, like you have 7 lives together, so I'm kind of like the third wheel here, and I don't feel comfortable in that reality. But she acted like that only because of her traumas, and because she was in this distressed state. Polly was the one who actually like pushed both of us towards this love. That was the most interesting part. Polly was never in the way, and like when she like observed us, she was like, oh my god, you guys like sort of meant for each other. That was her perception always, and we were both kind of like, me and Emilia were standoffish and kind of just didn't want to surrender. And again, Emilia couldn't believe that I could heal her. Like she even didn't believe that I could see her. She was like, oh, you just see me for a few days and then you just like will stop seeing me. And I'm kind of like, this is not how it works. I could be able to see you for your entire life, and even after that I would be still seeing you if Emma would even die. And she couldn't believe that. She was like, no, it's just like you're just temporarily trying to sort of like make me calm, but at the same time you don't want to like heal me. And sort of like she was going back and forth, and like she couldn't surrender to that. And it was only because she had, as Magdalene woman, she endured many different traumatic events beyond her hex. It was like instances of rape and instances of murder, all these like wonderful things that any Magdalene woman experiences on her path. And of course, in her past life, she was killed. She was murdered by her closest soulmate, who, after that murder, killed herself as well. So it was also kind of, she was living in the remnants of that trauma, exactly like Polly was living in the remnants of Eloise's traumatic death, or how Natalie was living in her experience. This was something that was also kind of like another coincidence that happened, is that all 3 women were murdered by their closest soulmates. And it kind of like, it can sound paradoxically, but they were murdered in this way because their soulmates tried to prove their love in this way. So this is just something how souls sometimes come to live these experiences. But this is something that was shared with all 3 women, and that was something that was really important for Emilia to heal. For me, that was the main thing, because I was like, I could clearly see, I couldn't see from the life of Aurelia, I could only see her like being dressed as a nun and kind of like covered in veils. But for me, the main thing that stood off from the moment that I saw Emma physically in the first time was that gunshot wound that I couldn't like stop seeing on her chest. And I was like, during the entire first meeting while we were there, I was only thinking about that, and there was like this one beautiful moment when we kind of like exchanged touch, and she was at the second round of the touch, when she sort of when she presented the rules for the touch, she took my hand and put it on exactly the same place where the wound was. So that was kind of like a very beautiful moment. And from that moment on, I'm kind of like, oh my god, like I need to heal that. This is why she did it that intuitively. She was guiding me to address that as a first sort of, as a priority sort of thing. But her soul insisted that Aurelia should be healed first. So I was kind of like in between these 2 women and trying to understand all of that. And I was also like presented with the idea of hex, but I also, that was something that my guides told me, but Emilia had no awareness of that. And I was also kind of like, I didn't believe in hexes at that time, like I believed in demon possessions. That's just, I think most people believe in. It's kind of like really obvious if you like look at mass shootings, if you look at like people talking to themselves, if you look at like different, homicides, like brutal homicides or domestic violence, it's clear that most people do these horrific crimes under the effect of the evil spirits that possess their bodies. And then, of course, we have all the movies about exorcism, and we have also many recorded cases of actual exorcism happening. So that was something that I never questioned, but the hex was just sounded really out there, even though Polly had curse, and the curses are, they are kind of like that's why I use different words, like the curses, they usually, how I call them, they're perceived curses. Is that, like, for example, Thomas Jefferson believed that he's cursed because his children and his wife died upon him, and like it was death after death. So he kind of like projected that curse upon his soul, which was not a real thing actually. Like it was just an energy of perception. And the same was with Damien, is that like when he cursed Polly initially, it was that kind of like idea of I want to control her. So it wasn't done in this like occult ritual where you actually like have animal sacrifice and you actually like draw a pentagram, you put like candles, all that stuff that's shown in the movies, and that's the only way to do hex successfully. And so I had no idea about the hexes, I didn't believe in them, and so kind of like I just pushed that guidance aside because there were like already too many things happening. I'm kind of like, this is just something I can sort of think about later. I was kind of like told about that by Mary Magdalene, but I didn't like take it seriously. For me, it was Emilia told me that she wants to heal existential sadness first, and she wants to heal the traumas of Aurelia, so that was my priority, right? And Emma kind of like showed me that she wants to heal that gunshot wound from the past life. So these things were already enough, to kind of like to even start a journey. And so this is what I told Emilia, is that despite the fact even if Emma would not accept me as a client, I will still take you for healing because you're important to me. You're like one of my soulmates. I still didn't know that she was my actual twin flame. I kind of like just perceived her as just another soulmate who I had a romantic relationship in the past life. And so I just reassured her that I will heal her, but she was like, no, you want to be with Polly, you don't want to like take me, I'm the trouble, I'm problem, like I'm just gonna like make your life miserable. And she just continued to sort of like run away, from this healing. And then the other interesting thing happened is that after around a week, a little bit later, when we kind of like celebrated my birthday, and I was like, I have feelings for you, I want to sort of heal you. And that's the thing, is that like every single time I see a soul, right, like that's the idea, is that I experience love to them. It can be different love. It can be love for one day. It can be love for the duration. Usually it's a love for the duration of the healing. But that was completely different love. And it was sort of like growing upon me like day by day. And then we have very interesting sort of day. Shortly after my birthday, we were just, I was journaling on the meadow, like in Stanley Park, at the second beach, in my favorite spot. And I was at that time I was thinking what I could do with my life. I was like, still didn't believe that the death journeys practice can be like, it can become my profession, or can be something that I can sort of offer to clients. I was perceived it as only something to heal us. So I didn't take it that seriously, and at the same time my writings were also kind of like far away to like consider something to earn a living. And so, but because I had all this knowledge of the Cassandra's life, and then of course I had this program of sexual alchemy, which mainly Polly have created, and then I just adjusted it, and Polly have created it, of course, initially as the idea that how she wants us to sort of grow with Jessica, right? Like if she would return, and that was her sort of aspiration originally, but right now we kind of like scrapped our plans with that already. She kind of like changed her directions, but the program was still there. And I'm kind of like, why can I offer this program maybe to clients? Maybe there is a way to sort of find my way to become a sexual priest. Maybe there's something, this is something that I can do. I kind of like contemplated on that, but I like didn't have any pathways, and of course I didn't have money to like invest in kind of like getting certifications. And I was also in this perceptions that like I still need to understand like the ethics of profession, and like just have some kind of like training or education, have some sort of like a certificate, all these things. So I was like, it's like it still doesn't seem as something tangible. And so I was sitting there and just journaling about my emotions, and Emilia came over to me, and she brought into my space the two souls who were her teachers, like who were teachers of Emma in physical life, who kind of like helped her to become this practitioner, right? Like one introduced herself as Brittany, one introduced herself as Catherine, and Catherine was the main one. She resides on the lands of Vancouver, and she has her own school here, and she was also Emilia's karmic soulmate from past lives. She was her mother in many lives, and like some kind of like a figure or motherly figure. So she was an important soul for her. And Emilia was like, well, maybe they can help us to figure you out, to help you to understand what you can do as sort of like as a practitioner, or like have what kind of practice you can build. That was sort of her idea. And it was also interesting that Emilia just knew so many souls of sex workers. She could like just draw them into my space quite easily, not even like poly, but just like so most of the souls that eventually I met of sex workers, they were brought to me by Emilia, and she was like this just being who knows how to summon them, and they just know how to find her. Emilia could bring any soul of sex worker into my space, and if sex worker required healing, or she would like say pray for help, Emilia could hear those prayers, and so she would bring that soul into my space again to kind of like address any sort of issues. And I was surprised by her design. And then soon after, Mary Magdalene kind of like, well, Emilia is destined to become a queen of sexual healing arts of British Columbia if she would be healed. And so that's why she has the supernatural talent. She can just easily gather or any soul, or she could hear their prayers, like. And usually when the soul comes into my space, it means that a woman asks for something, like she prays to somebody, or she prays to herself, or to nature, or maybe to God, maybe to Jesus. It doesn't really matter, to Buddha, whoever. But I do hear their prayers, and especially I do hear the prayers of sex workers, and that's how their souls come into my space. But because my space is guarded and protected, they can only sort of reach to Emilia, and then she kind of like makes her case for the soul, and that's how she kind of like can bring them into my space, because my time is limited, of course. So this is how we kind of like, from that moment on, this is how we started to work, and it was kind of like just was so natural. And the idea why she brought Catherine into my space is that because I kind of like, I see that she needs to heal something as well, like what that is. And Catherine was like, I just recently lost my mother, and so I'm grieving, and I'm kind of like thinking about my own mortality and what I have achieved in life, and whether like sort of my life was good, and whether maybe I should go as well. And I kind of like just cleared that grief in that session quite quickly, and told her that like I'm sure there's more that you can achieve in life, and you shouldn't sort of consider your own death. And that was the reason why Catherine came into my space, and why Emilia brought her. And so after we did that cleansing, we gathered around the table. It was me, Catherine, Polly, Emilia, and there was another soul that I worked at the time. And they kind of like all gathered around me, and I was journaling, and they were like, no, we'll figure you out. Like we have this great group of people, of souls who like connected to sexual healing arts. And so we will find something that is your purpose in this life. So like maybe you should become a practitioner, right? Like that's kind of like my thought. And as we started talk around the circle and kind of like just have this connection and exchange of energies, I just had the most unusual feeling, like it descended upon me. It's almost like I saw my future, like I kind of like just seen my most empowering dream. And that most empowering dream, of course, was created because since Emilia is my sort of twin flame and my destined partner in my most empowering future, she became the female principle of this vision. And the vision was that that I can build a temple of sexual healing arts in the tradition of ancient Egypt on the lands of Sexuality. And that's what's something that Emilia really wanted, but that's something that like also needed the masculine energy to be able to create it. And of course, these such temples should be created in specific ways, and there should be certain protection created in them, and I could only do that. And of course, and the other thing is that like I just knew what services could be offered there. I had my program, and I also knew that usually these temples employ women of different souls who like sexual healers, like there should be always one woman who has a soul of Isis, one woman who has a soul of Magdalene, one woman who has a soul of Hathor, and sort of like etc. Like whoever is sort of needed to create the spectrum of different healing practices and different energy lights. So the clients, like me, for example, if they need to do certain initiations, they wouldn't need to like go through an entire city or province to seek a woman with a specific goddess archetype. They can just go into one place, and they can sort of they can be offered healing journeys with a woman depending on their vocation. Like, so for example, if the man is supposed to govern others, he should try to work with a woman who has an Isis soul. And if, say, for example, if a man is going to war, he should work with a woman who has Nephthys soul, and like sort of like that, to get the energies that they need to have the most empowerment on their path, on their unique path, and to get the knowledge, and to get the energies that would make them the best version of themselves, right? So I had all this knowledge, and that was very important for the possibility of creating this temple. But I was like looking at my life at that time, like I was still in that. I was just like doing my day job as assistant film editor with no like prospects of becoming anything else. That job only sustained me basically just months to months. I was continuing to live kind of just, again, 2-3 paychecks away from like being bankrupt or living on the street. And I'm kind of like, this is just insane. This temple, especially on these lands, would cost me like probably a couple millions of dollars at least, or even more than that, like comparing to like what the prices are here. And just like something that would never, like in my imagination, just physically how you would achieve that. But the vision was so strong and was so powerful, and all souls were kind of like, no, like this is what you have to do, like this. And Emilia was like so excited. She was like, this is what I want. This is what I would like to achieve. This is like sort of my garden of empowerment. This would be the legacy that I want to create on these lands. I want this temple, and I would love to build that with you. And I kind of like recorded the image of that temple in my journal, and I like to this day, I just dream about it. Like it's not really that you have to. This is the physical reality of our world. Is that, yeah, physically I may not have any pathways to build it, but if I will dream about it, and if I will envision it, then there might, like, the world maybe open up, and the opportunities will present themselves in one way or the other for me to be able to build that with Emilia together. And I believe that this is something that's really needed, especially in North American lands, where sex work is treated with like disrespect and without reverence, and not honoring what these healing practices can actually do for people, and especially seeing how broken people are in Canada. They need any types of healing, and their souls definitely need that kind of healing. And especially like if a woman works in a temple, she's more empowered. Let's if she says like works in some kind of like brothel, or like if she doing independent work, because not only that she has a community, and say for example if she's like not attuned to one client, she can pass it to her colleague, and the colleagues can do the same, so they will have actually more clients. And at the same time the temple can have resources for education and resources for health, and kind of like and just how to do that work in the most empowering way. So it was just something missing on these lands, and something that Sexual spirits wanted as well. This was something that they kind of like were guiding me towards all this way. I just didn't understand that. And so I recorded that vision of the temple, and I was like, oh my God, like this is such a beautiful vision. This is just such an amazing thing. And then I started like sat on the meadow, and I started to meditate, and I'm kind of like, how can I sort of achieve that vision? And I saw the temple, like the vision of the temple, and Emma was standing sort of in, like sort of on the steps at the front door, and she was kind of like just doing hands like this, kind of inviting me. And the vision was that if I would follow Emma, if I would heal Emilia, I would be able to arrive to the vision, to that vision, and to be able to build a temple somehow. So the guidance is that just commit to your feelings and commit to healing journey with Emilia, and then everything else will fall into place in the right time, you know. And so kind of like I was super excited about that. I had something to live for. I had this like an empowering dream, and I was really hopeful, because not only that it was something that I wanted, that was something that Emilia wanted, that was something that Polly wanted, and the Sexual spirits, but it was also something that like really was really needed on these lands as well. And just again, the idea behind the existence of the temple, it would be kind of like almost like a resource in a school, where a young woman who wants to start in that profession, she could come there and sort of like heal her past lives as well, and kind of like just address her issues before she would embark on this journey. Because I was seeing what it does when a woman like Jessica starts in this profession with her traumas. She will eventually loses her soul. So I didn't want that fate for any future woman who would be born as a sex worker, who would be born with these talents. I wanted to have this resource. And it was also like, if there was a temple, even if a woman doesn't work in this temple, but still does sex work, she would have better self-perception, better self-worth, because she knows that she's doing something empowering rather than something demeaning. That's how society wants her to see this work. So with these all ideas in mind, and with these visions, we continued our journey. Emilia was never comfortable with in the presence of Eurydice. She felt kind of like intimidated and perplexed, and again, because Eurydice was a spiritual princess of these lands, and she has this like a special status of protection from Sexual spirits, that was another element that like intimidated Emilia. And she was like, and because Eurydice was already healed, she received all her spiritual talents. She eliminated all the traumas of past lives. She was like shining as an empowering soul. So Emilia was like, oh, I would never be as good as Eurydice, because like I'm just this traumatized. And I'm kind of like, I joked, and I kind of like told Emilia that I found Paul in much more distressed state. She was like in this deep well in underground, and like she was completely lost, and you are just partially lost. You're not fully lost. You are still here. You just like you just confused about your kind of like traumas, you know. And Emilia didn't want to believe that. She was like, no, I'm not as good as Eurydice. Like you would never love me as you love her. And so it became this, like a jealous competition almost. And she was like, I would never be able to have the same intuition. All these things kind of like just surfaced for her, and she didn't know how to proceed. And then there was another thing that that happened a few days later. While she was like in this confusing state, she didn't want to accept my healing at all. She was like basically running away back and forth and kind of like just feeling strange about this kind of like perplexing situation. Being three of us, she was like, if you would be alone, if we could spend time together, just the two of us, that would be completely different. I could surrender to this, but like being next to you, to Polly, I'm just like, it doesn't feel comfortable to me. And I have to say, I have to talk about the second temple that we kind of like supposed to build on the lands of the seashell. Then that's the temple that Polly has envisioned. And of course, Polly has envisioned the temple for death journeys. And this is something that she cares deeply about. And this is something that when we started death journeys, she had this idea. And when we observed the life of Astarte, she could actually see how this temple could work. And it shouldn't be like a really big temple. It doesn't really need that much space compared, say, to like sexual healing arts temple. It just needs kind of like a basement with a locked chamber, and the sarcophagus in the middle of it. So because Polly had this vision of this temple, and when she presented that vision to seashell spirits, and they agreed to kind of like provide a space where they want this temple, they kind of considered it as a part of offerings to them for their help. She was asked to kind of like draw a blueprint of that temple, and she kind of like shaped it. She has this beautiful design. It was like shaped as a Russian letter P, so it's kind of like goes like this. So there are two kind of like main areas, and they are divided by the small narrow corridor, like the entrance in the beginning. And I saw it as a beautiful design, but I'm kind of like, this just doesn't make sense. Like it's insufficient use of the land. We should use sort of like whatever is in the middle as well. But then I kind of like I've seen that. This is how the lands of Seychelles look like. If you look from the map, is they are connected by this small strip of land, and then there are like two shores and the water in between. So I kind of like, well, maybe that's why Polly has created this vision like that. And even though Polly was also kind of questioning her vision, we always trusted Polly's intuition, and we just knew that if she has envisioned it like that, there should be a spiritual reason for that. And the idea is that like one section would be actual Temple of Death Journeys, is that where the sarcophagus would be in the ceremonial space, but the second part would be sort of like a living quarters, let's say, and in the furthest way from the hall, she created like a bedroom for herself, a separate bedroom, and like she did like a floral design. She like basically did the fireplace, like all everything that she wanted basically in her future bedroom. And we kind of, the idea is that like if you create that in the spiritual realm, then it would be projected into the future, and then eventually it would sort of manifest in one way or the other, or like would materialize in some form. And we did spend many kind of like days dreaming in that space, and just like spending time in her bedroom, just lying around and kind of like thinking about things, and like dreaming how we would sort of can be there together if she would return to Jessica, and that kind of like would be sort of the present for her. But when Emilia came to our space, and she was like just this like a nerve wrack, and she didn't want to surrender to the journeys. Polly had this great idea. She was like, well, let's at least show her this temple, like how it looks. And so we all three of us went into this temple, and we looked at the place of death journeys, we looked at other rooms, and then once Emilia stepped into that bedroom, all three of us kind of like had this intuitive feeling that it was always designed for her. And it was like this, just completely, we looked at each other, like look at one another in the eyes, and we kind of like, how is that possible? Like how could Polly sort of envision this like that? That she basically have created one of the right part of the temple for herself, but the left part of the temple for Emilia. This is why she has this design separate, so like they would sort of like not interfere, but had their own most empowering places. And we were kind of like confused by that, and we didn't know like what to feel. But of course, Emilia was the most confused. She was like, "How could you sort of build a room for me that feels so me and feels so like my home, and I feel so kind of like secured and nice here, and I could surrender here?" And then she was like, she wanted to check her intuition. She was like, "Can I just lie in this bed alone and kind of see if I can surrender to the space to confirm if this is the right intuition, if this is the correct thing that we like kind of like thinking, if this is truly, if that would be truly her room, she would have no problems of like sleeping there, and kind of like finally would not be such a nerve wrack, and finally would start like stop worrying so much and surrender to the healing, right?" But because she was like in this competition with Eurydice and kind of like just, oh my God, I'm not as good as her, all these things, she was just, she couldn't like calm herself down, right? And so Polly was like, yeah, this is a great idea. Why not we try this? So we returned to our apartment to continue our writing, to work on our book. And Emilia just stayed, like lied on the bed and tried to sleep, and immediately she fell asleep. And what happened is that she didn't wake up for 3 days. She was sleeping for 3 straight days. And of course she was exhausted after her troubles. Of course she had all these troubles, traumas of past lives and karmic wounds and all of these things. And she was chaotically looking for any kind of help. And she was exhausted by that time. Like she like tried everything to be able to heal, but nothing worked. And here I was kind of presenting her that like, if we would address your existential sadness, if we would heal your hex and we would remove the traumas of past lives, you would actually can become empowered, and you can actually become a queen of sexual healing arts of this province. And so receiving that knowledge and seeing that Polly was healed, and Polly kind of like tried to also tell her all the stories of how she was healed and kind of to reassure her that I know what I'm doing, she just fell asleep and couldn't wake up for 3 days. And we kind of like, we were amazed. We kind of like kept checking up on her to even like see if she's alive, but she was just completely relaxed and safe. And it was such a tranquil image to see her there. She was just, it was definitely her place. She was feeling so comfortable in that. And she was claiming that space by sleeping for so long. She was like, I'm not gonna leave here, right? Like this is my bedroom, this is my bed, like I'm just taking it. Like it doesn't really matter that like Polly kind of like envisioned it originally for something else, and that was like very cute to observe. It was an incredible and beautiful image of seeing Emilia finally surrendering and finally allowing herself to be herself, and just seeing her calm and tranquil was a very wonderful feeling, a blissful feeling. We couldn't like stop marvel and how amazing Polly's intuition was, is that she could just we didn't know that we would meet Emilia, right? Like, but she could sort of like predict that with just trusting her intuition, and that she created the space specifically for her, and that Emilia didn't want to change anything in terms of like the layout. She eventually kind of like changed the design a little bit, but it wasn't. It was still honoring sort of kind of like Polly's vision. But it was such a strange feeling, is that we kind of like we could see that this place belongs to her. There is like no question about it. And while we were waiting for Emilia to wake up, Polly had this great idea, and like sort of when Emilia returned and we could see her finally soften up, finally stop reminding herself how broken she is, finally surrendering to her Magdalene essence more, just her grace and kind of like softness and all these receptive female energies. She was much more attuned to them right now. And Polly kind of like presented this idea. She was like, okay, these are the new rules, is that and they would apply both for spiritual vision of this temple, and if it would eventually be built in physical life, that would be the same rules, is that Polly would take the right part of the temple, and she would just be in charge of the Death Journeys temple, and she would never go into a left part of the temple, and that would belong to Emilia, but Emilia would be more than welcome to come into her part of the building. And when she kind of presented this idea, and she did that, of course, to gain Emilia's trust, so she would sort of fully agree to healing journey, Emilia even became more sort of receptive and more graceful and more grateful. She was like, oh yeah, I can see why that you're not trying to impede on our love. You're trying as much as you can to sort of to cater to my whims, to cater to my distress. And she really liked that. And so this is how it became to be, is that these were the new rules. And sort of once Emilia received this bedroom as a gift from Polly, she understood that it's safe to proceed with our healing journeys. And so from that moment on, we kind of like established these rules, is that because Polly would have to do some ceremonies until the end of the year, and we have to continue our writings as well and to work on our books. So we kind of like made these rules that when we need to work with Polly, Polly would be in my space, and we kind of like will be just working on these things. But in our free time, she would go back to Seashell, and we would spend time together with Emilia, just the two of us. And that was another thing that kind of like reassured Emilia that she can trust this journey. And so after all these things happen, Emma reached out to me, and she said that like I'm coming back to Vancouver in the beginning of June, and so if you want to continue meeting me, I have no problems of kind of taking you as my client. Right, but the problem is that I was presented with this vision of the Sexual Alchemy program that I wanted to present to her. And then, of course, I had to ask her if she would like to take this journey with me. And so I was glad to receive that email, but I was like, well, would she accept my offer? And so I wrote this like a long email to her, basically outlining the idea of this program. And I would like to read that email to you, because I think it's important to just like to show the complexity of our story, and how we came to be in this process. Hi Emma, I'm very glad to hear from you, and it made my day that you would like to continue our work. I'm really excited. Still, I've contemplated a lot about the answer, and I must say this is one of the hardest emails I have ever written. First of all, I would like to thank you that you approached our session with courage when you knew that I was withholding necessary information and my energies. It was unfair to you that I avoided some intake questions, and I apologize. It was only because of my insecurities, as I'm still in the middle of my shamanic education and questioning my magic. I had to confirm that you are who I believe you are. I've been searching for you for the last 9 months, and when we met, I felt desperate, lost, and defeated, thinking you don't exist, and I just imagined you. Yet, that said, now I'm actually glad that our prologue happened the way that it did, as our first session initiated some unexpected healing, so I'm grateful to you. Now, I'm fully ready to explain why I came to see you. I'm looking for companionship based on sacred intimacy, and now I know enough to clearly see that you can assist me on my journey of empowerment and healing. I want to approach the energy that's been given to us with honor, integrity, and reverence. I know the highest reasons why I received this divine gift, and I want to treat it as such. I deeply believe this journey is a great opportunity for growth and healing for both of us. I am on an important spiritual mission for the next 12 to 18 months, and I would like to ask whether you would consider being my partner in crime, as I can't do this alone. I completely understand that we will be taking session by session approach, and you can end our engagement at any moment, but I have to share that this is where I'll be coming from. It's very important for me to commit to this process in the way that it was presented to me. I would be happy to explain what are my spiritual and healing goals at 12 and 18 months points. It's mainly concerning the philosophical esoteric book I'm writing in co-creation with the spirits of our lands. In terms of healing, it's about the immense grief my body and soul carry, some complex emotions associated with my past life as a sexual priestess in the Temple of Isis, as well as healing my past of an awkward, unattractive virgin teenager who dreamed of exploring his powerful sexual energies with an experienced, free, and empowered woman of the same level of energies, but who had to constantly suppress his dreams and desires. In case you are interested, I was given a clear vision of how to proceed. The basic idea is to move towards level 3 of your program over the next 6 to 8 months, with 3-4 steps between levels. After that, we can explore us further for the next 4-6 months. My book has to be completed and presented to Sexual Spirits by April 28, 2024. I don't have a clear vision for us after that point, but I know that spirits will give me further guidance if we get there. All I know is my book would need to be refined by the next US presidential election, and you can help with that too. Each session would be a ritual that we would co-create together. I would bring some ideas for energy exchange and touch practices I've studied over the last 2 years, and you would apply your expertise so we can create each ritual to honor us both. I'm sure you know most of the practices I want to explore. Even though we would have a clear destination, the main goal would be to enjoy the process, pleasures, and whatever will occur as we collide. Also, if you wish to experiment with something or have certain practices you like but can rarely explore, I promise to be your faithful test subject for anything you wish to try. I'll approach this with an open mind without judgment or shame. I was told to relate to you that this book is a permission slip for you to go anywhere you wish to go, as the deeper our experience would be, the better book will turn out. I'm writing this with great vulnerability, as this book is the most important work I'll write in my life. It's a very challenging work. I've been researching it for the last 2.5 years, and I wrote a prologue in the middle of April, but I got stuck after that, unable to write a single sentence. Although I knew the stories that would create this fairy tale, I felt I was missing an important element. Then, a week after our meeting on my birthday, you and your soul broke my guards, and I've surrendered to the possibility of you embracing this mission. I've cried through the half of the day, but then I finally understood what I was missing and began writing again. I'm only writing notes for now, but I see that with each session you will explain to me how to advance further. Here's how I see the next 2 meetings. For the first one, I would like to invite you on a spiritual walk and for the conversation about this over a picnic in Stanley Park for 2-3 hours. I want to show you the corners of my world and share some things about my perceptions of this life. They are not my reservation, but more like things I would like for you to know about me before continuing, as well as an opportunity to address any questions. The healing goal would be to advance the connection between our souls. The second meeting is a 3-hour ritual and the first step that we will co-create together, including any boundaries. My idea is to start with a conversation and some dancing, then move into breathing practices to connect our energy bodies, and then move into variation of sensate focus therapy with a clear and maximum limitations we both agree upon. Each hour will have its own rules. That would be the basic blueprint for the following rituals: continue strengthening our energy bodies and slowly remove limitations during the sensate focus part of the session. I can present my ideas in person more clearly, and you will be able to shape them in any way you see fit for the best benefit of both. I would love to schedule both sessions during your time in June, say a walk anytime during the week and a ritual on the weekend. But it's totally up to you how much of me you're ready to accept now. We can start with the picnic and then decide from there. Also, if it would be beneficial to you to know more about anything described above, we can schedule an hour session via Zoom. I'm sure you'll have some questions after reading this, and I'm ready to be scrutinized to earn your trust. But if you have enough information for now, we can just set the time and date for the first meeting. Or we can schedule a short phone call about appropriate offerings for described sessions, the logistics of the meeting, or anything you would like to discuss. I'm up for anything that would make this easier for you. Also, I honestly don't know what would be your personal boundaries in co-creating this catered journey together. I would love to receive any guidance or follow any rules you may set for our communication. If you see our connection as something different, I would gladly honor your vision and would love to work with you in any other approach you will offer. Full of reverence and anxiety, Alexander Formos. This is kind of like a letter that I was anxious to send, and I was trying to be as open as possibly could, trying to present to her whatever I can, and I was not believing that she would respond to me with a yes answer, but she actually did, and she was fine just meeting for the picnic, and that's what we did. We set up two sessions, just 4 days apart, and we met for our first for that walk in the park in the early June. And the walk consisted of we were supposed to walk around the Last Lagoon Lake, and the idea that I presented to her was that we would walk in silence, and through that process we would hear what the spirits of Last Lagoon Lake would want us to hear. This is sort of the idea, is that I was trying to present how I work with spirits of the lands, and this was something that I wanted to show her as my personal practices, but also I consider Lost Lagoon Lake as my one of my best spiritual friends, and I just wanted to introduce him to her. And when she approached it, I'm kind of trying to describe how to talk to the spirit of the lake, and asked her whether she talks to the trees, and she said, yeah, I do. And so I said it's basically the same concept, is that you just allow to hear any guidance that comes through the lake, and that's why we will have this walk in silence. And she kind of looked at me and she responded, I was just talking to a friend about the session and I didn't know what to do, and I just intuitively said to her, oh, maybe we'll just walk in silence. And I'm kind of well, you see, we're already sort of matching the energies, and it's all these synchronicities that I seen on my path, there were just confirmations of how aligned my journeys and how important it was for me to meet her. And I was just so amazed when she said that. I was oh my God, she just knows, she just knows me, she just knows what we need to do and all these things, and I just don't need to even explain certain things about my perceptions or my reality. And the idea was that we would walk around this lake and kind of talk about what came to us after we would settle for the picnic. But once we started this walk, she kind of completely ruined it. I know that she was dealing with too much at that time, and she was not in a place to surrender to it, and basically it was sort of quite disrespectful for the entire process and the spirits as well. She was trying to run away, and she was like not walking, but basically like going into fast pace. And I was seeing that she was not even trying. She wasn't looking around. She was like looking just straight, and she was just wanted to be done with that. And I was clearly seeing that she was like not hearing anything, because she was just not comfortable with this entire process. It was something that like she never done before. And of course she was also puzzling through her own feelings towards me, and she kind of like trying to suppress them, of course. But one of the most beautiful parts of that meeting was me kind of observing her, how she was sort of running away from this experience. And I was just looking at her face and kind of like looking at the way that she was. And the only thing that like was in my mind, I was like, I'm trying to study a woman that the spirits brought into my space to be my partner, right? Like, so it was like, I was not choosing a partner or like rushing for a woman because of how attractive she was or how sexy she was, even though she was the most sexually attractive woman that I've ever met. It was still kind of like this curiosity, I think, and just genuine interest of how she is, like in her own like little quirks and things that she does, the way that like she smiles and the way that she's trying to, like, I was just like laughing inside how cute she was from trying to run away from this experience and trying to run away basically from the feelings towards me and from even like being next to me. That was the most, I think, wonderful and mesmerizing feeling. I was like just completely drawn to her because of that, because of how she was in that space, and how she was trying to avoid that experience altogether. And so we ended up on the same meadow where I was journaling about the temple and the idea of the temple, and we had this picnic. I had some tea and some fruits from the farmer's market, and some chocolate, chocolates, like chocolate candies that I sort of usually do when I'm trying to impress a girl. Just I rarely do that because I don't have time, but I love doing these chocolates. I have different recipes, and it's just something that I like myself as a treat, but because I don't have time, I usually just do them when there's like certain occasion or like a celebration. That's what I told her, is that like I did these chocolates for our picnic, and I also gave her a box with chocolates if she wanted to take it with her. And that's what I told her, is that like I rarely do them. I just do them when I want to impress a girl. And she just smiled at me, and she said, check. And I'm kind of like, well, of course, I mean, it always works, but at the same time, I just love like sharing my love in this way, because when I do them, I kind of like do them with my hands and sort of, there's like a meditation practice where I'm like sending my love into these chocolates. That's why they're like great, not because of course I use the best possible chocolate and all of that, and like different interesting flavors. For example, in that place was one of them was lavender honey. That's like one of my most favorite flavors that I do. It's just a great combination. But yeah, this was that's another thing that was very romantic with Emma. And so she kind of like asked me a few questions here and there about the program, and she mainly basically said that I feel too reserved to commit to it because I never did anything like that, so I don't know how to approach it as a professional. And I basically told her there's like nothing that I would ask you to do that you don't want to do. I just want to have a partner who I can explore sexual healing arts in any shape or form in the any boundaries that like you would allow. It's just sort of like almost kind of the important part was co-creating it together, but it's just something that like I wanted to explore these things with somebody who was as curious about sex as I was. And so for me that's what I told her. And it kind of like it took away some of her reservations, but it turned out that it actually didn't. And it's again very hard to talk about Emma and the space that she was, because she was losing her soul at that moment, and she was dealing with a lot. And then eventually I found out that she was also like her soul also chose to die. And initially I was not presented with that knowledge. I just didn't know that, but her soul was has already, in the same way as Polly, she was getting lost, and she was seeing that she can't achieve her most empowering life. There was no pathways for her to become the queen of sexual healing arts in British Columbia because of the Canadian Society. Emma told me how like that she chose this path because she believes in it. That's her spiritual path, that she comes from her own desires and her own sort of like calling from her heart, and that she's not doing this for like any superficial reasons, but it's like the honest thing that she believes that this is who she is. And I'm kind of like, of course you are, because you were born like that. This is what I basically told her, is that your soul chose this path. Of course I know that, but she basically told me that like her close people turned away from her, and like she was shamed and abused and judged, and that's why her soul chose to die. And of course I didn't know that awareness, but of course when the soul chooses to die, even though she wasn't, Emilia wasn't yet lost, when a soul makes this decision, they try to prepare a body in advance, so that's why Emma couldn't fully surrender into that space, because there were many things on her mind that she almost like wanted to finish in life, to kind of like to see the people that she missed, to visit places that she wanted to visit. And sort of like there was this period of closure that was supposed to occur over the next 4 months, and then she was supposed to die in the fall of that year. And so of course there was like literally no space for her to like even to consider something like that, and to surrender to that practice. And of course she didn't know me yet, and she was kind of like she said something like, I don't want to lose myself, and even though I understood what she meant, I kind of like I had this joke that like well, you never even discovered yourself, right? And so this is the program that would allow you to find yourself. This is the idea why I'm presenting it to you, and this is the idea why I'm claiming that I'm not acting as a client who demands something from you, but rather a partner. Even though I'm paying the offerings, I'm just a partner where we create everything together, and I would not expect from you anything that like you don't want to do. And if you don't like something, we don't need to do that. We just will try different practices and see what lands, what works, and what not. And so she kind of like a little bit calmed down, and so we went for another small walk to kind of like to part our ways in the place where we started it. When we settled the rules of our engagement, she asked me if there's something else that I want to share with her before we sort of part our ways. And I told her that I also need to share with you that I'm seeing your soul, and that your soul asked me to heal your existential sadness. And I asked her, do you experience existential sadness in your life? And she said, all the time. This was her response, and that was like, there was like a deep honesty in her eyes, and she was almost like crying inside from that existential sadness. She didn't know what it is, and she didn't know how to resolve it. She didn't know that it's rooted in past lives. And I told her that this is what I would like to heal for your soul, and this is what she asked me to do. And if you need to know more information, I can certainly share. but that kind of like took her aback and kind of like a little bit freaked her out, of course. Like that's just evident. I think anybody would sort of react in this way, but it was important for me to kind of like to say that that was it is a form of me asking for consent, right? Like so, and I told her that even if we're not doing these sessions, I would still heal that for you. It doesn't really matter for me because this is sort of my integrity of a healer. I will just this is the expression of my love as well. I didn't say that in these words, but that was sort of important for me to make her aware that this is the work that I will be doing. Of course, she didn't take it seriously, and she kind of like brushed it off, I think. And so we finished our picnic, and we were supposed to walk back to the place that we met, and this is where we decided to part our ways. And sort of on our walk back, I told her about my marriage for 10 years, and it's like that it ended. She kind of like got sad about it, and then she told me about her partnership with her soulmate that lasted for 5 years, and also ended like around 3 years ago at that time. So it was approximately the same time that it happened. And she said, like, I never wanted to end that relationship. I wanted to continue, and she didn't want to continue that. She didn't want to end that relationship because it turned out that they were bonded by this hex. And so even though she received some empowerment through that connection, it was her karmic soulmate that was in her life for the last 9 years. It was still kind of like the bond that like was rooted in trauma rather than in empowerment. And so and then her soul also like brought into my space that there is a third person who is also bonded by this hex, and that it was placed on all three of them. Of course, Emilia was the primary receiver of that hex, but it was also kind of parts of that was placed up on these two people. So it was kind of like very, very disturbing thing, because like it was not only right now it was not only about her specifically, but it was about like the two more people. And the problem with this hex was it was almost like how I would explain to it, it's almost like a nuclear radiation. So like if the host is her, and these two men also partially hosts, it means that everybody in their sphere, so like all their family members, they experience like energies of that hex, like almost like radiation from that hex, right? So it was affecting lives of like 24 people probably, and it was impeding their natural progress. It was impeding their free will. But what that hex also did is that the main thing that it did is that it took away her free will. So every single decision that she did in her life was clouded by that hex. So she could never make the most empowering and independent decisions in her life ever without the influence of that hex, which is like a most horrible thing that you can like just imagine if you would be in this way, right? Like it's just and she was like in her early 40s, so like spending the most of her life in this way was just gruesome. And that's why she was in this like a state where she was like going back and forth between like surrendering to this practice or like retrieving. That was partially because she was under influence of that hex. So we met 4 days later for the actual ritual, for the four-hour session. We spent around first 2 hours talking to each other, and I just wanted to present the idea of the temple to her and how her soul brought into my space 2 of her teachers, and then I could confirm that these were her teachers because they were listed on her website. And so when I like sort of told her that like your soul insisted on meeting them, she was like kind of like nodded her head, understanding what I was trying to say, but she was like also weirded out. And the worst part about that ritual, like we met at 11 a.m. on the Saturday, and not only that, like she asked me to wait for some time, but when I came into her space, it was clear that she just like sort of parted with another client or with a lover. I'm not sure what happened, but that she was still in the energies of that session, which was completely disrespectful, of course, and like not honoring our commitment and not honoring me as a client. It's very hard for me to earn my money, and of course I understand that she's kind of like, for her my money is like nothing. She like just whatever my $1,000 for our session is literally just like drop in the bucket compared to what other clients pay her. And of course she wasn't like and really that interested at that moment to continue our sessions. She was like really reserved, and so this is something that like any sexual priestess is supposed to do, is that they're supposed to clear their space and detach their energies from the previous clients. And of course there should be a space in between the sessions. And sort of the first hour was me basically battling through these energies while I was trying to talk about my perceptions, when I was trying to talk about the temple. It was mainly met with this like a wall of resistance, because again she was in a different headspace. She was still in the emotions of that session. She was still in memories of that session. And again, at that time I didn't understand what she was going through. And when sort of the body is preparing for death, and this is what it happens, is that like there's so many overwhelming things that like a person can't process everything, that they don't have time. They trying to fit as many things as possible into one space, kind of like trying to rush off the last moments of life, like right, like this is the main idea, how it sort of works. So we spoke for 2 hours, and then we spent 2 hours in the ritual. She was also trying to sabotage that. Whatever I kind of like planned, most of it she just scrapped, and she and she didn't discuss that. She was just kind of like told me to do this, right? Like this is what I'm gonna do, and we're kind of like not gonna do what you are asking to do. And I was okay with that, but I would love to have a conversation and communication regarding that. And then when we eventually got to touch, that was the sort of the most empowering thing, is that like we kind of we had this game that I introduced, that we would slowly undress each other during the 15 minutes, and leaving sort of our underwear and bra on, and we would have our eyes closed, and we would just like surrender to the feelings and to trying to feel the energy body of your own and of your partner, and try to sort of like guide them into like energetically through the touch. So like ask them in your thoughts where you want to be touched, and kind of like try, and they would try to match that. And I think like that was the most amazing experience that I ever had in sex work. That was the most empowering and most beautiful sensate focused therapy session that I ever experienced. I never was able to replicate that in any kind of like other settings. And of course, I don't have any other abilities to try with any kind of partner outside of sex work. And of course, in most cases, just way too expensive to try something like that. And especially if you're like afraid to get hurt again, and always thinking about your like past. After we completed that ritual, we received the spiritual seals of Yeshua, Mary Magdalene through this ritual. That was how it was designed initially. And we settled on the bed to talk to each other. Like we kind of like just sat across one another and started to talk about our feelings. And that was, again, in the temples of sexual healing arts, that's the part of the journey, is that you're not only experiencing the touch, you also like talk how you felt about it. And it was even more healing than the touch itself. So that entire part of the session was just like incredibly amazing, even though she was like going back and forth of trying to settle into it. But when I was the first receiving the touch, and she was the second one. And when I did that to her, I did few things that like she basically asked me intuitively to do, like mentally, and that when we kind of like start to talk, she was asking me why I did certain things, like why I touched in a certain way, and how I just handled the entire session. And I was like, yeah, I just felt like it. And she was like, well, this is what I wanted. So it was really kind of really incredible spiritual experience. And when you allow an energy bodies to exchange between the partners, you can actually start to not only feel where they want to be touched, but you can actually feel what they feel when you touch them. That's just one of the most incredible shamanic magics available to sexual healing artists and their clients if they sort of do this work properly. And even though we didn't have the preparations in the way that I wanted, that were important, it was still really empowering. Then we had some other practices, like looking into each other in the eyes for prolonged periods of time, and just kind of like asking certain questions. And then we closed the ritual with a 12-minute nesting ritual. And nesting is like the most important part in sexual exchanges for men, because this is where they receive the most empowerment. The woman receives most empowerment through her sexual pleasures, but because man's sexual pleasures are limited, even if he has multiple orgasms, even if he has a full body orgasm, it's still not comparable to women's pleasures. So for him, the main pleasure is to bring woman to pleasure, so he could experience her energies through the nesting ritual. And the nesting ritual is like, it can be conducted in any way the partners want, but it basically, you sort of it can be explained as like intense cuddle or embrace. It's just like you lie next to each other, and you kind of like allow woman's energies to kind of like envelop you, and then you exchange them, and in this way you are able to achieve the higher planes of consciousness. And this was the main idea for the ritual as well, beyond the receiving spiritual seal, is that through that nesting ritual I received what I was needed to continue writing my book, to kind of like these feminine inspiring energies from the higher planes of consciousness. But by the time that all of that ended, and when the nesting ritual was concluded, I was like completely in love with this woman. I was like, I couldn't put it in other words. I didn't want to continue our rituals. I was like, she's my partner. She's like the woman of my dreams. This is the woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with. I never kissed her, but that was just this feeling of like, she's my woman. Like, there is no other question to be asked. And towards the end, almost like when we're still in the bed, I looked at her and I said, it was like really kind of like quirky and just, I don't know, like simple and maybe like even stupid, but with all my spiritual insights and all my spiritual perceptions and like my complexity, all I said that next to you I'm feeling like a man, and I'm feeling that you are my woman. And there was so much empowerment, and there was so much truth in that she's just responded, oh, like, this is so cute and sexy, and I can see what you're saying, sort of thing. And like, she just smiled at me for that comment. But yeah, again, out of everything that I could say, I just said that, and that was like so honest and so kind of just us. I don't know how to even say that. I just felt us being us, and I just felt as myself. I had that feeling before when I met Veronica, and I was living with Veronica, but I was still kind of like in an adolescent age. I was still kind of like young adult. I didn't know who I was. And so even though I had that feeling, is that like I feel like a man with her, um, and I'm going through empowerment with her, and she's my woman, it was still kind of like completely different. Now it was real mature feeling, and it was really honest feeling, and I wanted to feel like that. I wanted to be as my most empowering self around her. And I think that this was something that like kind of was also triggering for her, because I was really in my power next to her. It wasn't that because I was so confident and like figured everything out and like had my life straightened out, like I was like in financial mess. I was still dealing with many things in my life that like didn't work out. I still didn't know what my future held. But next to her, I was just, as a man, I just felt confident, empowered in myself, and just like being on my path. And I think that kind of like also was a strange feeling to her. And so I stepped out from that, from her apartment building, and just exited on the street. And I was walking the street, and I had this most beautiful and blissful feeling. Like I was feeling joyous for the first time in like what it was like 3 years, even more than that. It was just a complete feeling of joy and bliss and just comfort, and that pleasure, all these things, just kind of like feeling good, like feeling happy. And I almost like forgot how it felt before. But as I was like walking down the street, it's like probably like that feeling lasted for about 5 minutes probably. And then I just like started crying in the middle of the street, because I was like, if the seashell spirits are right, and I need to find my happiness, not with Jessica, but with this woman, with Emma, and that I wanted that, right? Like this is like, we were of the same age, we had the same future destiny, we had the same past, we had the same sort of like connection with our karmic soulmates, we had the same journey. Like her journey as a sexual priestess was about letting go, and my journey into the sex work and shamanism was also about letting go. We had a lot of like the same feelings of grief, and we had the same kind of like ideas about the most empowering ways of sex work. And we both believed that the sex work is the purpose of a soul, it's a destiny, it's a calling. And to this day, she's the most desired woman that I have ever met, and I would be always dreaming about having sex with her, and I would not be ashamed of that. And I would like, no matter how fast she runs away from me and where she is, that would be always in the back of my mind, and one of the highest dreams that I would like to pursue. And I see a lot of empowerment in our connection, and just something that that I know that I can grow with her in that area in the ways that I can't grow with anybody else, right? Like, and that we can sort of not only try these programs, but we can, through our connection, we can sort of elevate them and create variations of that for future sex workers, or for clients. It doesn't really matter, or even for ourselves. But it's like it's really interesting that like I also never experienced that feeling, because like her body was designed in a specific way. It was like exactly like as a body of Cassandra. I was like seeing Cassandra in her, of course. That her magnetism was unmatchable to any other woman, like the way that she responded to touch, and the way that like she was sort of designed spiritually, energetically. That was what, for example, Mary Magdalene told me as well, is that she has this special magnetism the way that Cassandra had, and that would through that magnetism you would have the most empowering nesting practices, and this is how you can sort of like achieve your greatest achievements in life, right? So this is why it's not only like a pleasure or soul things, it's like just rational as well on many levels, why I continue to dream about this woman. But yeah, that joyful feeling lasted for 5 minutes, and I was like just burst into tears in the middle of the street. And I just couldn't stop crying, because I was like, if Ariadne wants me to find my happiness with this woman, and I really desire her, and I really dream of our empowering union, it means that there is no other way for Polly but to die. And that kind of like it's one thing that like if Polly would just like, live and continue to exist in the physical life, but it was a completely different feeling of kind of like, oh, I have to send her to death again. And that just kind of like freaked me out again. And I was almost like seeing that if I would continue to meet with Emma, every single session would be another nail in the coffin of Jessica, almost, that I'm betraying Jessica in this way, that I'm like just driven by my passions, by my love and my desires to Emma, but in this way I'm betraying Jessica, even though I promised like to keep her safe and to keep her alive. And even though I knew that it wasn't my decision to make, and that Polly insisted that I pursue my feelings to Emma, and she was the one who demanded me to kind of like to stop my nonsense and to kind of like just surrender and know that she's my partner, I was still kind of like in this very shocking state, because it was like life after another. And of course, I don't know how many years I gifted Jessica, and it doesn't really matter at this point. And I hope that she will live as many years as possible, and I hope that she will have some sort of happiness. But I know it's not going to be a long life anyway. And that kind of like and then the idea is that it was also this idea that I would now, like, I was living in that dream that I would maybe at least see Jessica, as a friend or like as a client, or like doesn't really matter, like sort of just as a woman walking down the street. But after that session with Emma, I was like, oh no, I would never see her again. Like this is just how we are. Polly would never like bring her into my space, because of our past trauma, because of everything that we experienced. And that kind of like just made me really sad, and like I experienced another like element of grief. And that was the most kind of joyful and sad day of my life, I think. I don't think there was anything comparable to that. I was like torn apart between my two Magdalene women, and I was like freaking out and like saying, oh, of course, like this is just the destiny, like you don't we already heard the story of Yeshua having his one Mary Magdalene woman. Of course, if the story is being sort of relieved in a different form, there should be some sort of a twist, right? And so I was in this perplexed sort of feelings, but I'm kind of like, no, I just understand that my empowerment lies in pursuit of Emma, and that it was clear for me that this is what I want to do with my life, and this is what I want to dedicate myself for, and I want to heal Emilia first to be able to do that, and I was looking forward to that. So this was the beginning of the story, and I will continue how I heal Emilia in the following episode, and I hope to see you there. Have a good day. Bye.